Just don't call me Rebbe and we're good. Hi, Sarah. I want you here, not there.
I want to be there, not here as well.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Beth. Good to see you. Hi, Brenda.
Hi, good morning.
The boxes are coming to life slowly but surely. All right. People in the room are gathering. Small but mighty crowd. Hi, Jay. Good to see you. All right, we'll wait just a couple minutes for people to come in. Oof. Please.
I got an extra one here.
Well,
That's enough.
there were also, I think, some in the other. You have that one?
I do.
Oh, good.
You get the better one.
Oh,
Hey, you want to pass it out?
sure. Do you want this? This is. Don't worry about it. Yes? No?
It's okay, relax, enjoy it.
Here you go. Okay. Um, Valerie. All right. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
Good to see people. Okay. That's good. Thank you, Victor. Okay, we are going to start in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Oh, I see Sultana's here. That's nice. Shabbat Shalom, Elliot. So good to see you. Amy, Tallahassee, Linda. Hi, Linda.
Shabbat Shalom, nice to see you all.
Good to see you.
Congratulations on your award, Rabbi.
Thank you. It was let out of the bag before it should have been let out of the bag. So I can't discuss it. I can't discuss it until May 22nd.
Okay. It's a tantalizing teaser.
It's an Oscar, it's a Pulitzer, it's a Fulbright, it's one of those. Quietly developed. Thank you.
Suffice it to say, we're very proud of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I don't do well with this, but thank you. I do not.
Okay, well then we're proud of us because you're our teacher.
Better. All right, welcome. We're gonna get started. It's 8:48, and we're about to dive into Parshat Emor, a story that I talked about last night, but now we're going to get into the textual nitty-gritty. And there's a lot of nitty-gritty. It's really the language in this story at the end of Amor is fascinating, and the themes are painful. All about exclusion and blasphemy. So, okay, so those are the general sort of headings, and now let's do the bracha over Torah study. Everybody in cacophony. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, God, who has brought us together for this sacred study and revealed to us your divine wisdom. Amen. Okay, so we're going to dive right into Amor. We're going to have one introductory pasuk and then sort of look closely, do a close reading of the story at the end of the parsha. And it's the only story in the parsha, and you know I like stories, so I chose the story. But there's also law involved as well. And it includes the only named woman in Leviticus, only one, So that's kind of unbelievable. And her name is Shlomit Bat Divri, which can be translated in different ways, but one way is peace, the daughter of language.
Oof.
Oof. Okay. So here we go. Let's see if I can share my screen. Welcome to people who are still coming in, both in the room and on Zoom. And, okay, I think this should be it. Now, here we go. Okay. Screen. Okay, so I actually added at least one text since this was printed out, so you'll have it up there, but I'll tell you when it's not on the sheet. For those of you who use Safari, they've changed everything. So now I'm in Google Doc with Safari. It's complicated. And if anyone's interested in using Safari, I'm happy to explain it to you. Okay, so I called this the puncturing of holiness, blaspheming and defaming. Ooh.
Sorry, can you make it bigger by any chance?
By any chance, yes, I can.
Thank you.
Let's see. How does that look?
Better. Thank you.
Better?
Yes.
Okay, so at the beginning of the Parsha, as regarding the importance of the priests to maintain their holy status, there is this verse, which will also relate to our story at the end of the Parsha. And it says, and just let me just say something about process today. I'm going to do a bunch of text because I want to get through the story before we discuss anything. So hang on to your questions and comments for a little while, or put them in the chat. Here we are. Kiddoshim yiyu le'Elohehem, v'lo yichalalu shem Elohim. So holy are they to be to their God. This meaning they are the priests, and they are not to profane the name of God. So in other words, if they're profane, somehow the name of their God is profaned, which is interesting. Ki et ishe Adonai lechem Eloheim. For the fire offerings of Adonai, the food offerings of their God, hem makrivim, they bring near the hayu kodesh. So they are to be holy. So there's something about them bringing offerings and them coming closer to God, which places an emphasis on their maintaining their holiness, because you can't be impure or tameh, and I know that impure is not the best translation of tameh, but it's the opposite of tahor, which is, imperfectly translated as pure. So it's important that they maintain their pure status as they approach God. And that pure status is also related to being holy. Okay. So here we are with the word Yichalelu, which is sort of usually translated as profane, but also means to pierce, to be slain, like a halal, which is like a corpse, to wound, pierce, to be wounded, and to play the flute or pipe, which has little perforations, right? Mm. So that's an interesting verb. Let me just think if there are other. No. So yeah. So that's an interesting verb, and will relate to our story. Although the word won't be used, a different word will be used, which has a similar meaning, which I guess I can call a synonym, maybe. Okay. Here we are in the story of the son of the only named woman in Leviticus. And, beforehand, there are instructions regarding lights and the way the loaf offerings are to be set up, and everything's very symmetrical and beautiful. And suddenly, out of nowhere, we have this narrative. And it says, Vayetze ben isha Yisraelit. So then now the son of an Israelite woman went out. But who ben ish Mitri? And he was also the son of an Egyptian man. It's like, uh-oh, right? We've just kind of disturbed sort of the symmetry of the text with this sort of liminal figure who's half Israelite and half Egyptian. And we know like the resonance or the connotations of Egyptian is not positive. So how he came to be the person he is with an Egyptian father, we are not told by the Torah, although the rabbis had a field day with that question, and we'll see that or some of that in the Midrash below. So what happens with this liminal figure who's half Israelite and half Egyptian? Vayinatsu b'machaneh. So he fights in the camp. Ben Yisraelit, the son of the Israelite woman, the Ish HaYisraeli, and the purebred Israelite man. Now, my Chavruta and I looked up the word Vayinatsu, Sharon Konanis, is here. And it's a really interesting verb because it seems to indicate not like the fighting of war, but personal fighting, like when two people, I think it's inevitably men in the Torah, fight with each other, and something personal seems to be at stake, right? So it's like there's something direct and intimate about it. And what happens? So again, like totally mysterious text, right? Number one, why is he half Egyptian? How did that happen? Number two, why are they fighting? We have no idea, right? So the Midrash will come to explain that, or at least give us one interpretation of why they were fighting. And then suddenly he blasphemes. Vayikov ben Haisha Yisraelit et Hashem. So now the son of the Israelite woman reviled the name. So we'll look in a minute what Vayikov means. But here it's translated as reviled by Everett Fox. And then, right, so revile and then Vayikalel. And insulted it. Now, Vayikalel is very interesting because it means to make light of, and it's the opposite of kavod, like you shall honor your mother and father, is kavod, which means weightiness. Give a weight to that. You give a weight to someone you respect. And here, this man made light of God's name. Vayaviu oto el Moshe, and they, we don't know who they are, so it's an enormously cryptic text, right? Sort of frustratingly so. They brought him to Moshe, so who brought him? I guess the crowd that was there. And then suddenly, as an addendum, B'Shem imo Shlomit Bativri Lemate Dan. So now the name of his mother was Shlomit, daughter of Divri, of the tribe of Dan, which is considered the lower tribe, or lower status tribe. Okay, so now you have this ridiculously cryptic story. I'm sure all kinds of questions are bubbling up, some of which I've named. But let's look at a few interpretations, and then I will open things up. Okay, so first, this verb vayikov also means, like we saw above, halal, right? The verb of halal, to pierce, perforate, bore, point, prick, designate, and then to blaspheme. Okay, so there's something here that's, again, mysterious about puncturing a hole in the name of God. What could that mean? So one scholar says, you can read the whole essay if you want to, cursing Adonai is more than simply expressing contempt and irreverence. In the biblical worldview, it is attempted deicide. Whoa. And this is punishable by death. Okay, so whatever he did, very serious, right? Trying to murder God. And what led him to that moment? Okay, so you know what? Let me stop there for a few minutes, and then we'll see what the Midrash does with, how the Midrash and Rashi after the Midrash tries to fill in some of these gaps and questions. So let me see.
Bless you.
The bless you. That was a great sneeze. Excellent sneeze in the room. Hi, everybody. Oh, hi, Sharon. Good to see you. Hi, Ronnie. Okay. Hope you're feeling okay. Okay. Any comments, questions so far? And as usual, I'm going to invite everybody to be brief, or at least concise. Oh my God. Marla, and then Wendy.
Well, with this side, in addition to blaspheming God,
There's the mic.
I'm so sorry. Could you speak more into the mic, please? Thank you.
Technology.
with deicide, in addition to it being a punishable, a crime to blaspheme God, if you're blaspheming God, aren't you in a way kind of defiling the world as well if God created the world? So it's
Totally.
hard.
Totally. And not only defiling the world, but defiling your own creator. So, Rabbi Sharon and I discussed this morning. It's a kind of suicide, not only deicide. Because if you're damaging the one who sustains you, then you're also being hurt. So it's really, I think, an act of like enormous fury, but maybe also an act of tremendous despair. Yeah, we're gonna get into that. Okay, now I saw Wendy.
I think
Mike.
Mike.
I think it's interesting that the Torah here acknowledges him as the daughter of an Israelite woman because maternal identification in terms of faith is really not seen until after the destruction of the first temple with Ezra, and in the Torah, it's always through the Father. Always through the Father, and it's very unusual.
Totally unusual. I think it's in fact sui generis. Like this is it.
That he is identified that way.
Totally. He's identified through his mother.
Relative to the Torah, this is unique.
This is not only unique, I think it is a solitary example.
Right.
Unless I'm missing something.
Yeah.
And if I am missing something, someone can fill me in. Okay. Paul, and then I'm going to the screen. Amy, I'm going to call you, but I just want to tell you that I'm including all kinds of midrash, and I don't want you to preempt me. But if I don't look at the midrashim that you want to give over later, I will call on you again. If that's what you have to say. Yeah, it's okay? Okay, good. Amy surrenders. Okay. Paul.
And the reason why that would be the case, that the mother is identified rather than the father, is we don't know the father. And so therefore...
Either we don't know the father or they don't want to name the Egyptian name.
But it's an illegitimate child. Like there is something illegitimate about the individual.
Yes, correct. Perhaps we don't want to name the Egyptian man, even if we do know his name, because his Israelite status is what's relevant. Well, the Egyptian status is relevant, but not to give it the dignity of naming.
Well, I was going with the reason that they would identify this fellow with the mother rather than the father is because the birth is illegitimate in some itself.
Yes. Okay. I will go with that. Okay. I'm going to go to Sharon and then Tony. Sharon Dolan on screen.
Okay. Hi, Shabbat Shalom. I hope I very quickly looked at the sources. I don't know if you're dealing with this issue. You can shut me down if you are. But I was just studying with Aviva Sornberg this week, and she brought up a very interesting dimension of this half Israelite, half Egyptian. His father, I don't know if you're talking about that, but his father, I don't know if this was Rashi, she goes through so many sources, who basically said his father was the Egyptian taskmaster that Moshe killed.
Yes, this is one of the midrashim, correct. It's
Oh, you
actually
are?
not, it's not on the source sheet, but there's a whole elaborate midrash, if we have time, I could talk about it later, that his father basically pretended to be the husband.
Right. Well, he
of
sent,
the-
it's sort of, it's a little bit of, like David sending out the husband of Bathsheba. I mean, sending out the husband and then going in and pretending to be the husband and impregnating Shlomit.
Exactly.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
also just this idea that it was Moshe who killed this man. I think she further said that the man that the son has a fight with is told him about his past, which he didn't know. And
that midrash I haven't seen. That's fascinating.
Isn't that fascinating? And that she talks
source of that, I would love that.
And she talks about how that's a kind of Lashon Hora, and that's only going to bring trouble. Like telling him this stuff about his past, which he didn't know, maybe is also part of what enraged him and caused him, to blaspheme.
Okay, so beautiful. So let's take a step back and note how the midrash, and we'll see this also with the commentary, fills in the holes, right? We saw all kinds of questions as we went through the text, but remember always that every midrash interpretation is not the only way to fill in the holes. Okay, so we're going to consider, well, it's not, of course, for everybody. So we're going to consider other ways of filling in the holes as well. Okay, Tony.
So psychologically speaking, over many, many years, it was more and more astounding to me that somebody would be willing to commit suicide as their last gasp of of expressing their own need to control the world. And
that's what you've seen as a psychiatrist, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Wow, yeah.
And
like when you can't control the world.
If I can't control the world, then I'll kill myself because it's my last, because I can control it.
Yeah. You know what, let's come back to that when we look at one of the midrashim about why he cursed.
And it seems that this may be the first instance in scripture of what Buber refers to as the perversity of self-will.
Interesting, thank you. Yeah, and let's come back to the question of suicide and how people who can't control the world ultimately try to control the world, maybe by hurting themselves. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, Jay, and then and then Amy, you have your hand up for later, right? Okay, when we get through the midrashim, Jay.
As long as we're doing our midrashim here, I always try to take the straightest path. I think it's interesting that this is one of the places where basically it's a mixed marriage, especially in the patrilineal sense, that this is actually noted. And I'm wondering if there's a connection between that and the idea of somebody profaning God. That isn't, that comes from outside, that comes from mixing things, like shotness, this is a form of shotness.
Yes, I think in the broadest sense, we could look at the story as representing the dangers of someone who represents Egypt, in the broadest sense.
Well, not just Egypt, but it's kind of like shotness, really. It's a mixing that shouldn't happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I've seen people make that connection. There's a mixture here that the text doesn't know how to deal with. And we'll see how the text resolves that illicit mixture. Okay. Okay. I am going back to the text. Let me share. Okay. Go. Try this again. Why is it not appearing? I hate this. don't understand the mysteries of sharing. I'm going to try one more time, and if it doesn't work, Caroline, we're going to go to you. Let's see if I close this. It's gonna come off. Aha. Okay, so now let's look at Rashi. So Rashi starts to fill in some of the gaps, right? Based on the Midrash. So he says, Bat Divri. So what does this Bat Divri mean? Dabranit Haita. She was like a big mouth. Talkative is not as, it's more negative than that. Midaberet im kol adam. She talked with every person, but maybe every man. Lefichach kilkala. And this way she got into trouble. So what kind of trouble did she get into? So Rashi's not saying this, but this way she ended up sleeping with an Egyptian, right? She was like, made herself too available. So he's bad-mouthing her, right? He's bad-mouthing her dvarim, right? The way she talked. And basically blaming what happened on her. Okay, so now this gets even worse. This is the Midrash on Vayikra in Leviticus. And it says here, Rav Huna Amar, B'Shem Bar Kapra, B'Shvil Arba'a Dvarim Nigalu Yisrael Min Mitzrayim. So Rav Huna, in the name of Bar Kapra, said there were 4 things for which Israel merited being redeemed from Egypt. 1, Shalosh Shinu et Shmam. They didn't change their names, right? The Hebrew names, they didn't change them. Be'et L'shonam, they kept talking Hebrew. V'lo amru lashon hara, and they didn't gossip. V'lo nimsa beinehem echad mehen parutz be'erva. There was none that had committed sexual immorality. Okay. Then skip a little, and then they say, Vayitsei ben ish. Then they quote the verse that we just were talking about. Vayitsei ben isha Yisraelit. And there emerged the son of an Israelite woman. V'lo nimsa achad mehem parutz be'erva. And there was not one that was sort of tainted with a taint of sexual immorality. Today, but no, there was one. Upirsama hakatuv, and the Torah makes her sort of famous or publicizes her. Shene Amar, as it is written in the verse that we just talked about. B'Shem imo Shlomit badivri lemate Dan, and the name of his mother was Shlomit, the daughter of words, from the tribe of Dan. Shlomit. De Amar Rabbi Levi Dahava Patata Bi Shlama. So Rabbi Levi said that she was like very talkative, patata, right? In her greetings, which actually plays off her name, Bishlama, how she said shalom to everybody. Shlam lach, shlam lachon, hello to this one, hello to that one. And why was she bat divri, the daughter of words? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak shehevia davar al bina, and she brought words or a matter to befall on her son. L'mateh Dan, why is it the tribe of Dan? Because what happened was Gnai L'imo, a disgrace for her, or for his mother. Gnai Lo, a disgrace for him. Gnai L'mishpachto, a disgrace for his family. And Gnai, and disgrace, L'shivto Sheyatsa Mimenu. And it also disgrace for the tribe that he came from. Okay, so here they're basically saying what happened is completely her fault. And it's interesting, I was discussing this with my Fruta this morning, Rabbi Sharon, and I was saying, like, on the face of it, her name is so beautiful, right? Peace, the daughter of language, or wholeness, the daughter of words, or whatever. And then you have this terrible story. And the rabbis have to make sense of like, why is her name this? And what does it have to do with the story? So they turn her into a slut, right? They turn her into a slut. That's what they do. And they say her name indicates that. I know, it's
The word
disturbing.
slut is just so shouldn't be used in the world.
Okay.
Personally.
Yeah,
I just
I
find
hear
it
you.
a dirty.
It does feel, yeah, it
needlessly
feels like
dirty,
but that's what they do. That's what they
Well,
do. That's how
Well,
they
can-
demean her.
They can go take a hike as far as.
It's been a re-empowered word, like queer, there's slut walk, people.
Well, there you go.
Oh, wait. So this is too important. So Jesse, explain how slut is re-empowered or reappropriated.
Just because, since third wave feminism and sex positive feminism, a lot of postmodern frameworks, a lot of those words that have been meant to demean people have been taken back and reinterpreted, and women should be able to be positive and outgoing
Holy sluts.
without being judged. Yeah, and it's the same way as now you have queer theory studies. That used to be a really hurtful term, and it's been re-empowered. So that's not only it's not just not a negative term, it's a very powerful term with a huge intellectual body of knowledge around it.
Thank you, Jesse. That was very helpful. Okay. So now I find the next midrash really helpful in understanding what happened with her son, and actually this relates to Tony's comment before. Okay, so it says, "Vayetze ben Isha Yisraeli," the son of an Israelite woman went out. But from where did he go? Like, what do you mean he went out? From where? So, Tanei Rabbi Chia Parashat Yuchasin Yatsa. So he went out from like the matter of lineage, right? Or matters related to lineage. And how does this work? Sheba Lita Ohalo B'Machane Dan. He went to set up his tent in the camp of Dan, or the tribe of Dan. Because that's his mother's lineage, right? So he figured that's his. But they said to him, Amrula, Malacha lita ahocha b'machane Dan. What are you doing? Like, what's your problem setting up your tent in the tribe of Dan? Amar lahem mi benot Dan ani. I'm from the daughters of Dan. That's my lineage. Amrulo, and they quote Torah, right? They weaponize Torah at him. So it's a verse from Numbers, and it says, Ish al diglo be'otot levet elotam, below levet imotam. So it's written, each man by his banner with the insignias of his father's house, and not his mother's house. So what did he do? Nichnas levet dino shel Moshe. He took it to court. But he walked out guilty. So his recourse was going to court. He did the appropriate thing. But like Tony was saying before, that didn't work for him. So he had no sense of control left. What did he do? Amad begidef. He stood and blasphemed. Right? A kind of an act of despair. Or maybe, this is interesting, this has just occurred to me. Since the court didn't work, maybe he wanted to appeal to God directly. But because he was so enraged, he didn't do it through prayer, he did it through person. But he was still calling upon God's name. Right? If you want to sort of look at what he did more positively, and even people that hurt themselves, and God forbid commit suicide, like there's always like, it may go in the wrong direction, but there's a cry for help, or a cry of desperation, or a cry of despair. Like, what's the cry there?
A cry of sense of helplessness, to the point that if any of us can dial back from the despairing rage to I feel helpless.
And I'm trying to make a connection, I can't. Yeah. Or no one's hearing me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this next piece was interesting. It says, so what does the Egyptian part of it have to do with all this? And this is related to what Paul was saying before, but not exactly, but it's another way to look at the whole Egypt question. So Egypt, where God is dishonored, is the place from which the people have been brought away in order that they and God might live in mutually reinforcing holiness. The narrative of the Egyptian blasphemer, or should have said the half Egyptian blasphemer, therefore demonstrates that no taint of Egyptian ways should be allowed to affect Israelite society. You know, we were talking this morning, Rabbi Sharon and I, and I was saying that it's very complicated because we're told again and again, remember you were a stranger in a strange land, right? Remember you were a stranger in Egypt. So Egypt, like the memory and the past of Egypt has to be used in a very particular way. We can't mimic the slave owners, but we can remember, or we should remember, the experience of vulnerability, for the sake of justice in this world now. Okay. Yes. You know what? Let me read one more, and then I'm going to open things up. And if I'm missing important things in the chat, someone will let me know as well. Okay. So it says here. So she writes, and we'll see one more piece by her lower down, commenting on the tradition of kind of defaming Shlomit. Rashi on Leviticus 24:11 takes this midrashic tradition one step further, suggesting that Shlomit's explicit naming designates her not just as a gossip or flirt, but as a strumpet. That's a great word. And his mother's name was Shlomit, the daughter of Dibri. It is to praise Israel that her name was publicized, to say that she, and only she, was a harlot. In other words, Shlomit is mentioned by name and not merely called an Israelite woman, to distinguish her from the other women of Israel who do not share her bad character. How crushing to think that the Torah takes the trouble to mention this mother's name only to label her a whore. Okay, so let's take a break here. Let me just call first on people who haven't spoken, and then I'll turn to Jesse and whoever else wants to speak. Okay, let me ask Amy now. Are there midrashim that you want to bring in that we haven't? Amy Downs.
Thank you for letting me speak. The woman who said that she was his father was the one that Moses killed, and perhaps he had to appeal directly to God because Moses recused himself because he had killed his father. So maybe it's a story of recusal in as a subplot.
Very, very interesting. And also, I should say that the verb used here for fighting is also used with the two Israelite men fighting. Right. So the Midrash connects the two texts.
Right. Do we know anything else about the person he was fighting with? I mean, we know it was from Dan, but do we know any more in depth about the reason the person challenged him?
No. Not in the Torah itself, at least.
But not in the Midrash either?
Not that I know of, but could be.
Because the Erev Rav was there, right? So the Erev Rav were Egyptians, and why would he be singled out from the Erev Rav? And I think it's really kind of terrible.
Well, let me stop you for a minute, Amy. Let's just explain Erev Rav. So Erev Rav was the mixed multitude that went out with the Israelites when they left Egypt. So, the Egyptians sort of hangers on. Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Isn't it awful to slut shame somebody who was raped? I mean, she was raped, and it wasn't like it was a marriage. She was raped. The mother.
Yeah, so this is also what Wendy Zierler says, that, she, and we'll see this in a minute, that like many African American slaves here, they were raped by their, slave masters. So that I think is a likely, as opposed to the fact of calling her slut or whore and strumpet and all these things, it's likely, I mean, first of all, we don't know if this is historical in any way, But given it's the story of a former slave that has an Egyptian son, it makes sense that the connection we should make is that she was raped. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you'll see it's really interesting how we would come to that conclusion, but how our ancient predecessors come to a different conclusion, very different conclusion, given the context of their times. So I just want to look at the written Torah doesn't label her. Yes, correct. The written Torah doesn't label her. No, right? The written Torah does not make that connection. Right, exactly. Okay. Okay, so, if there's anything I'm missing in the chat, I can't keep up with all of it and still go forward. Okay, yes, Tomas, and then Jesse. Okay.
So just an open-ended question for you or for anyone that
Yes.
I really don't know the answer to, which is
Yeah.
that I'm wondering what light this story of Shulamit shines on the ethical crisis of these verses, because these verses of Leviticus are beloved by priests and pastors and Catholics and
With
Protestants.
this particular story?
The adjacent verses, because it's where we get an eye for an eye.
Oh, we're going to get into that. Okay.
Yeah, so just to set it up, like I've listened to so many sermons in so many churches that cite this stuff to make the point that the God of the so-called Old Testament is a meanie. And the God of the so-called New Testament is a sweetie.
Yes, exactly.
Because you have this,
Exactly.
you have this ethical, all the Torah on one foot, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
But here we have this awful symmetry of do unto others as they have done to you. Kill a killer, maim a maimer. And it seems an absolute paradox and a real crisis in the text. And I may be getting ahead of you. But
You are, but that's fine, and we're going to get into it, and that's really interesting. Thank you. Okay, anyone who hasn't said anything? Okay, then Jesse.
I'll take the lead. I'm a few texts behind. The first thing I would just say is, with all the different ways that we interpret the Torah in contemporary times as a postmodern document, as a living document that we can reinterpret, I would hope there would be a way to not judge any woman for their sexuality, whether she's, not to say, well, she was raped and therefore she shouldn't be shamed, but that nobody should be shamed. Just, I don't know the whole midrashing, but there should be some way, one. And two, it seems the earlier text about we should.
In other words, don't use her sexuality to blame her for anything.
For anything ever, nobody should be blamed for whatever their sexuality is. One. But two, and I'm sorry, I lost the text and I couldn't find it here, but when it said something about we should not be with an Egyptian or Mitzrayim, it seems to me more from.
What do you mean we shouldn't be with an Egyptian?
There was something about we should, lost the text, about Egypt, right? That you were saying no longer shall we be.
We shouldn't act like the Egyptians. We shouldn't, have the ways of the Egyptians taint us.
Right, but it seems to me we often say Egypt is like Mitzrayim as being a narrow space. So,
correct.
So the way Tony was saying, we should never be that despairing, right? And that reminds me of Nachman of Breslov. Do not despair ever. We have no reason ever to despair, right? And that.
He says despair doesn't even exist.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that could be the way to understand that passage. Don't ever let yourself get that.
Yeah.
So I have to say, I find that idea very oppressive.
Well, no,
enormously oppressive.
Which idea?
that despair doesn't exist.
No, don't despair. What do you mean, don't despair?
I think you're confusing depression and despair.
What do you mean, don't get depressed?
No, that's a different thing. That's a different thing.
Okay, what?
I think it means you're always loved, and you should always know that you're loved. That's what I'm trying to say.
If possible.
Should.
Yeah.
Nice.
From the man who despaired.
Okay, Ben, do you want to respond to this directly? Because Brenda's also, go ahead. Ben, and then I'll go on Brenda.
Ben, go.
Okay.
It's not directly to Jesse.
That's okay, that's fine.
It's responding to several things.
Yeah.
Okay, so let Brenda go, and then I'll call on you, Ben. Okay, now I want to get back to the text because we have some meaty legal material to get into that's really kind of juicy and controversial, as Tomas indicated. So 2 quick comments. Brenda.
All right, so I find it disturbing in a way, like that the fact that the father was Egyptian, I think is very significant. Maybe I thinking, putting it into today's context, that the prejudice that some people have against immigrants, and that the son has no place, he has no place in society, and he's made an outcast because of nothing that he had done, and that the mother is so villainized. We've really no proof against her, that we make these stories up. So that's one part of it. The other part was the commentary that when you blaspheme, it's like killing God. And like, well, how do you kill God? I mean, like, what strange concept that God could be killed.
It is a very strange concept, but I'm not going to get into it. But I want to address your first point, which I agree, this is an enormously painful story about exclusion that goes to the heart of so much of what is happening in our world, in America, and also in Israel. And the pain of exclusion, right, motivates and sort of animates so much violence. It's I mean, we all know, I imagine at one point or the other in our lives, the pain of exclusion. It's horrible, right? But he has no place literally to put his tent, to set up tent. He has no home, he has no place. So no belonging. Okay, Ben and then Richard. And then to the text, no more comments later. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
We can't hear anything. Can anybody hear anything?
There we go.
Here we go.
Is that better? So I have a number of connections between this in my life. One thing is that my father actually works on the study of acute suicidality. And so he's done a lot of research over the past several years over what he calls a suicide crisis syndrome. And it's around specifically this issue of how there's specific mental state that precipitates suicide, and that it relates to this. And so whether it's sort of a crisis of feeling like there are no more options, there's no escape, and you're trapped. And part of what precipitates that is there are 5 elements that precipitate it. And one of them concerns this exact sort of issue of basically feeling like this thing that you really, really value has been destroyed. And so it can have to do with a romantic relationship. It can have to do with your financial situation. It's a sort of death. And so I think that this kind of situation where somebody's been, they've gone to the place where they think that they should belong, where they should arrive, be able to set up their tent. In this case, a relatively low status tribe, and and even there, they're not allowed to be. And I think that that there's this kind of connection between feeling that kind of feeling and then kind of lashing out. And I see that in my children as well sometimes, in young children, when it's like if they've been excluded from a group, it feels like they will lash out and then they will be punished, right? And so it's like there's a real kind of difficulty in society around what to do about this impulse to exclude, and what the excluded person can do with their rage, with their legitimate anger. And I think like it can go inward, which leads to, as you're saying, ultimately suicide, and it can go outward, which can lead to, you know, further kind of social punishment and so on, and more people getting hurt.
Yeah.
And so I'll stop there, but I have more to say, but
Okay,
that's,
thank you.
those are the
Thank you.
connections I wanted to draw.
The suicide thread in this conversation has been really interesting.
Yeah.
Started by Tony. Okay, Richard.
Yes, do we have any concern for the execution being too harsh at this point in time when there's no Ten Commandments, no covenant at Sinai, no Torah, no specific notice and due process of what violations will cause the penalty of death? And do we have any concern now that we're focused in this country on due process? Do we feel any of that for the blasphemer, DeBarty?
Wait, I'm not sure I understood your point, Richard. So this is post Sinai and post Mishpatim, right? Post some of the laws that were given. Did I miss your?
I thought this was pre. I thought this was
No.
pre-Sinai.
No. But we certainly have concerns with due process in this country.
Okay, my mistake. Then I.
No, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. As the rabbis say, there is no earlier or later in the Torah. So let's now get into the legal text, which Tomas brought up earlier. Let's see if this is it. Aha. Okay. Whoa. Okay. So now let's see what happens. So this is one of, I think, 3 instances, I'm not sure, where Moshe doesn't know what to do. And we have to wait. It could be 2 instances. I don't know. Someone could put that in the chat if they know it. Moshe doesn't know what to do, so we have to like wait till God explicates or you know, tells the community what to do, or tells Moshe what to do. So it says, and this is the next verse after the story that we saw earlier in Leviticus 24, Va'yamihu b'mishmar. So they put him under guard. L'frosh lahem al pi Adonai, to clarify it for them by order of Adonai, or to explicate or to explain. By the mouth of Adonai. And it's occurring to me now that it's interesting that he blasphemed by pronouncing the unpronounceable name of God. And here we want something directly from God, and God's name is being used here. Okay, 13. Vayidaber Adonai Moshe le'emor, and Adonai spoke to Moshe saying, actually, Asher Chaim, do you feel like reading? I'm suddenly getting my voice is getting a little tired.
From 13?
Yeah, that's fine.
Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe le'emor, Yud Hei Vav Hei spoke to Moshe saying, Hoseh et ha'makalel el mechus lamachaneh, take out the blasphemer to outside of the camp. V'samchu chol hashom'im et yedehem al rosho, and all who heard him shall press their hands on his head. Viragmu oto kol ha'edah, and the entire Edah community shall throw stones at him.
So let's just stop here for one moment. So now they're referring to him as the one who's mikalel, or making light of God's name. And look what they're doing. They're taking him outside of the camp. So the one who's excluded, they're taking him even further outside the camp. And the ones who heard the blasphemy have to lay their hands on him, which makes me think that somehow they have to give back what they heard to him. So it doesn't belong to them, because whatever they heard is really powerful and destructive. And then they are to stone him. So if you think about how he made light of God's name, you know, in contrast with the heaviness of the stones, a kind of poetic justice, if not. We're all feeling like it's not justice, but a kind of like just.
It's yuck.
Yeah, right. I'm just pointing to like the symbolism of light and heavy here. Okay, let's go on.
V'el b'nei Yisrael tedber lemor, and to the children of Israel you shall speak, saying, Ish ish ki yaqallel Elohav v'nasa hek'o. Any man who makes light of his God shall carry or bear his sin. V'noqev shem Adonai mot yumat. The one who hollows out the name of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh shall surely be put to death. Ragom yirgemuvo kol ha'edah. Stoning, they shall stone him, all of the community. Kager ka'ezrah ben okvoshem yumat. Whether foreigner or native born, if that person is hollowing out the name, he shall be put to death.
So notice how like there was this violation, in the midst of the Israelites, and by this like liminal figure, sort of disrupting like the symmetry of the instructions of this parsha, and now law comes to restore order. And note that here the instruction takes pains to say that the sojourner and the native are subject to the same law here. Right? So somehow the law includes, or is trying to like contain the story. Okay, so now let's get, this is the piece that Tomas was talking about before.
Is the idea that God is saying this, or that a human saying this? It seems important.
The idea,
What?
the idea is that, that Moshe turned to God for, instruction, and God said this.
God.
That's what the Torah says. Yeah.
So procedurally, we can assume that because there is a step between Moses and God, that there is a due process. We were saying before that there was no concept of due process here. There is a concept of due process, and whether we agree with it or not.
No, he wanted due process before, when he couldn't set up his tent.
On the judgment.
Yeah, so this is after the fact. We're saying maybe there was due process and he was, determined guilty, but, for someone who has no place in the community, that doesn't seem like enough. Yeah, Elliot.
Yeah, so I just wanted to go back to the.
Can everyone hear Elliot? Because you're parking.
Yeah, to go back, to this comment from Rabbi Levy, and where this man wants to pitch his tent, and they said to him, no. It's patrilinear. You can't.
Yeah.
So there you have kind of the exclusion, the explicit exclusion, okay, of the other.
Yes.
Right? He's an other. He's not right. He's not
Correct.
pure, so to speak.
Correct.
And that precipitates a lot of trouble, right? A lot of trouble, for him, right? Because he's going to be stoned to death, right? And also for those who are stoning, okay? Because to be part of that, to be part of, a mob, a crowd that is pelting someone to death, has to have an effect on those who are doing that. And so that exclusion, of the other, is a real problem.
Amen, brother.
And how, basically, we are intermingled. Okay, and so when you can take it up to the current situations here in Israel, whatever, but that exclusion of the other, can lead to all sorts of problems for both, the other and for the people who are doing the excluding.
So let me actually use, let me use the phrase of that other scholar who says, we shouldn't bear the taint of Egypt. Now let me rephrase it using your comment saying we shouldn't bear the taint of exclusion.
Right.
And that taint implicates an entire community and society. Okay, I want to get to the next, thank you. I want to get to the next piece. which is sort of like the crowning piece on this very strange story, and we're going to try to make sense of it. And I will say, I have some ideas, but not all. I mean, yeah, it's complicated. Okay, so Asher Chaim.
Ve'ish.
Yeah, I just want to get to the next piece. So hold on, okay, yeah.
Ve'ish ki yaket kol nefesh adam mot yumat. And any man, if he strike down any soul of humanity, he shall surely be put to death. Umaken nefesh behema yishallemenna nefesh tahat nafesh. If he strike down the soul of an animal, he shall pay for it, soul for a soul. V'ish ki yetein mum ba'amito ka'asher asa ken ye'aseh lo. And if a man injure his fellowman, as he has done, so shall be done to him. Shever tahat, shever, a broken bone for a broken bone, ayin tahat ayin, an eye for an eye, shein tahat shein, a tooth for a tooth, ka'asher yittein mum ba'adam, ken yinatein bo. As he has given a defect to another human, so shall be done to him. Footnote, a noted jurist and I agree that this is brilliant because it prevents escalation, but that's another story. Umakeh vehema yishallemenna, umakeh adam yumat. One who strikes an animal shall pay, but one who strikes down a human shall be put to death. Mishpat ehad yihiyeh lachem, kager ke'ezrach yihiyeh. One law shall be for you, whether stranger or native born it shall be. Ki ani Adonai Elohechem, because I, Yud He Vav He, am your God. Vaydaber Moshe el bnei Yisrael. Moshe spoke to the children of Israel. Vayosiu et hamqallel el michotz lamachaneh. And they took out the blasphemer to outside of the camp. Vayirgemu oto aven. And they stoned him with stones. Uvnei Yisrael asu kasher tzivva Adonai et Moshe. And the children of Israel did as Yud He Vav He had commanded Moshe.
Okay, thank you. So a few comments about this, disparate comments. One is, so there's a connection being made here, I read in one contemporary commentary, that the murder here, we're talking here about murdering a human being, and why is this coming off blasphemy? Because it points to the power of language in our text, and that somehow blasphemy and like, you know, sort of is a way of indicating at least an attempted murder of God, and that's why we're talking here about murder of human beings. That's number one. Yes. Number two, my chavruta pointed out this morning, Rabbi Sharon, that the word here, yishalmena, which is mentioned a couple of times, you shall pay, or you shall pay for it, could be a play on Shlomit's name, which is fascinating, right? It's like, you know, you're paying, you're sort of restoring things. Also, one of my teachers once wrote a piece, and I don't remember the details, it was years ago, but I might be able to dig it up if you're interested, that because the idea of paying money for damage here is introduced and then sort of expanded by the Talmud, so that in the end, in Jewish law, you don't pay for an eye with an eye. You actually pay for damages.
You pay for what?
So you don't pay for an eye for an eye. This whole Christianity comparing to the Torah as opposed to rabbinic tradition is completely off, because they're comparing themselves to something that's earlier, earlier in history, rather than Jewish commentary that emerges at the time that Christianity emerges. Yeah. So it's completely unfair. Right. Okay, so the Talmud's all about paying damages. I'm not taking comments yet. especially not from people who've spoken yet. I've spoken already.
So you're just saying reparations supplant revenge?
Yes, ultimately. Yes.
What's that? What did you say?
Reparations supplant revenge in a Talmud for sure. I think what's going on here now in the text, literally, is they're trying to reestablish order, after this narrative of complete disorder, right? Kind of like symmetry. Okay, so what I'm going to do is read two more things, and then I will open things up for a few minutes in our last few minutes. Okay. One is just here from this scholar Mark Leuchter, the process of law, the idea that the process of law here restores communal holiness. You might not like how it does it, but that's the attempt. Okay, and then finally, one more thing, which we discussed before, but I think it's worth reading, from Wendy Zierler. Right here. I'd like to offer my own backstory. Sorry, it's not in your handouts. About Shlomit Bat Divri and the son she bore with an Egyptian man. The terse narrative of the Bible offers us no details on how the son came to be born and raised within the tribe of Dan. It is because of this lack of context that some of the Midrashic authors supply accounts of harlotry. But given the context of Israelite enslavement in Egypt, is it not possible that Shlomit, like so many African American slaves who were raped and impregnated by their masters, might have been abused and used by a slave master or overseer, and that is how she came to give birth, the son of an Egyptian man. And for some reason, this idea did not occur to the rabbis, which is actually a little confusing to me, even in the face of their sexism. Okay, so we now have a few minutes, 5 minutes, because I'm actually leading services today. And if you can hear the beautiful music in the back, you should all come. So let me go to Jay. And Richard, is your hand up again, or is it up from before? It's up again. Okay. So, okay, Jay, Tomas, Richard, as well. That's what I see.
I want to take off on what Elliot said, which I thought was quite interesting, and I hope I make sense, and connect it into textuality to something we recently read not that long ago, and language. And that is and exclusion. The whole point about being excluded outside the camp when you have the diseases, leprosy, or whatever we want to call it. And that's typically seen as punishment for Lashon Hara. So now we have language again. But if you look at the Pshat, and I love the Pshat actually specifically says the reason is when division, when somebody causes division between a man and his wife, and Ishla Re'ehu, division among people in the community, let's say. And so I think that's also connected to Elliot's point about exclusion based on language creating separation, both in terms of exclusion because of lineage and exclusion because of blasphemy. But basically then that exclusion has reciprocal, to Elliot's point, has reciprocal consequences. So it's all quite layered and complicated, but it comes back down to the issue of language, separation, exclusion, and the consequences.
Amazing. Thank you. I will say one thing about that unlike here, the laws of purity and impurity are much more forgiving because the exclusion and being outside of the camp is temporary. And in fact, the anthropologist Mary Douglas makes a beautiful point about our society compared to the Levitical society, or the values represented by Leviticus, which is like once you're in jail and then you come out of jail, it's very hard to reintegrate into society. Yep. But Leviticus mostly is all about reintegration. It's not about exclusion.
But in this particular case, it's about death. Because they get stoned to death, right?
Well,
the stoning is a little bit of an inconvenience.
Yeah, I'm not saying in every case, but I'm saying for the laws of purity and impurity, they're temporary. Here it's a different story, literally. Okay, Richard. I forget the lineup that I say. Okay, Richard, and then Tomas, and then as well.
Yes, Rabbi Diane, we can't know much about the character of individuals, but I'm just wondering if we can predict who's going to blaspheme God in a certain situation. We can compare this man who was not well connected with the Jewish community to Job, who was put through hell and back by God and still didn't blaspheme. And what would be the difference? One might be that Job had the faith to begin with and the relationship.
Wow, that's a great connection and such a profound question. So I'm just going to let that question stand because we don't really have time to explore it, but it's fabulous. Who curses God and who doesn't curse God? If I was Job, I would curse God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Two quick points, just building on that idea of reintegration. The stoning for the person who dies and is executed is not a reintegration, but I think it's significant that.
No, it's not.
But the people who do the stoning are precisely the ones who heard the blasphemy, right? That seems explicit.
No,
right?
no.
Like,
the whole community stones, but the people who heard the blasphemy put their hands on his head.
okay, so they're intimately involved in that.
Correct.
In that ritual.
Correct.
And so just doubling back to reintegration and purification, like the purification is for them, the hearers, not the speakers of the blasphemy. Like it's a mysterious ritual that they have to be so intimately involved in the punishment that somehow reintegrates them in, from their experience of witnessing the blasphemy.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
That's interesting and weird. That's all
Yes.
I know about it.
Yeah.
It's
But it reminds me that like when you witness a crime, you're also tainted, even if you're innocent. Like there's some tainting that needs to be processed.
Just so.
Either by bearing witness or trying to restore just something.
By remembering or forgetting, really.
Hopefully not by forgetting, but this goes back to Elliot's point about exclusion and how it, deportation of innocence, of really the people who are like, and it taints all of us.
Well, just to turn the text
Yeah.
upside down on,
Yeah,
on reintegration, you could say that the half-Egyptian blasphemer, he got what he asked for in a brutal way, because in the beginning he asked to be included in the
Ouch,
tent,
ouch, ouch,
right?
ouch.
Yeah, I know, but like.
So he's finally.
He's finally included because the law applies equally to the outsider and to
Yeah.
the insider,
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
sojourner
Yeah.
and the native. So the law of the Jews is applied to him, and he's finally included
Yeah,
in this terrible way. So it's
kind of a boomerang.
Okay, we have 3 minutes or less. Okay, Oswaldo, Ben, and then.
So very quickly, the first 30 years of my life, primary school, secondary school, was a Jesuit school in South America.
Exciting.
And I got beat up, whipped by the nuns and the priests. But always reminded me that the Jesus Christ and Christianity was a religion of love, and that those Jews actually came up with this concept of eye for an eye, justice, right?
Yeah.
And one time I was listening to the renowned Rabbi King Cruz, who I'm somehow connected to. And while she was listening to her, she was studying her stuff, and very interesting the concept of this concept that came about.
Okay, very brief as well.
Very quick.
End sentence.
And the concept that these rules that Christianity is loving, and the old traditions are harsh, and it comes from the period when Christianity was at its height of power, the Inquisition. So it's really not a concept of it's very easy for all powerful, and I'm killing you, to tell you, I am love, and
Yes,
you're
yes. Point well taken.
Which
Okay,
came
Ben.
from Rabbi Shai Held. Thank you. The idea came from Rabbi Shai Held at Hadar. This is Juliet.